Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Roger H3, and today we're going to talk about the most recent announcement for Season 9 that all heroes are now going to have passive self-healing. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, but let's go ahead and get on to the topic at hand. So for those of you who are unaware, Aaron Keller, or the director for Overwatch 2, came out and said all heroes are going to receive a self-heal passive in Season 9. And honestly, on Twitter and a lot of posts that I'm seeing, I see a lot of the reaction from the Overwatch 2 community is overwhelmingly negative. And to be honest, I'm not completely sure why, because I think this might actually end up helping the game more than what people think. So I want to go ahead and dive into a few different scenarios here about the self-healing passive, how it could affect the game, and how it's going to affect all the roles. To start, I think it's important to reflect back on what the support self-healing passive actually is right now. So I did a little bit of research, and I'm hoping the numbers I found are actually correct. I found this on the overwatch.fandom.com wiki. And what I see listed here is for supports, they will passively heal 15 HP per second after not taking damage for 1.5 seconds. And to put this in a time perspective for everybody, just so we can kind of visualize and think about how this works. So a support will need to be out of a fight or not taking damage for 1.5 seconds, and then they will only regen 15 HP per second after that. So if we take an example of a support having 100 HP when they start regenning, it'll take a total of 1.5 seconds for the time that we're waiting to start regenning, and then 6.6 seconds for the time it takes to get from 100 HP to 200 HP. So added together, this takes about 8.1 seconds of not taking damage and regenerating health as a support. And obviously over the past few seasons and potentially even longer, there has been a lot of criticism about supports having this self-healing feature and it making supports way more overpowered than they should be. However, I'm not going to dive too far into that, but I just want to use this scenario to take a guess at what our self-healing passive might look like on DPS and tanks. So with the knowledge that the self-healing passive the tanks and DPS are going to receive is a toned down version of what the supports currently have, I'm going to assume that maybe the healing amount per second, it might be like 8 to 10 HP per second, which I don't see as a extremely high or oppressive amount that's going to ultimately completely change the game. Additionally, I honestly think we're safe to assume at the fastest this self-healing will start is 1.5 seconds, and we don't know that maybe potentially they will end up doing 2 or 2.5 seconds. I don't foresee them going longer than 2 seconds. I'm going to make the assumption that it's probably going to be 1.5 seconds for everybody else as well, and the amount is just going to be less. So now that we covered what the self-heal passive is for supports and a potential prediction of what the self-heal passive is going to be for DPS and tanks, let's talk about the impact on the game and how the game might play different or what changes we might see in the meta. So I think the most prevalent point of this that we need to discuss is how this impacts supports and if this is kind of like a buff or a nerf to supports, in a lack of a better way of like explaining it. I think by adding a self-healing to all heroes in the game, it is kind of a nerf to the support self-healing ability. A lot of people tend to complain about the support self-healing ability, and now that everybody's gonna have it, it makes it not something unique to supports. So it's going to essentially, in a way, negate and mitigate the issues that people have with that specific passive because everybody's going to have that passive now. So in this way, it is a little bit of a nerf to supports. However, at the same time, this means that supports may not have to track down their DPS as much as they usually do. If somebody's playing Reaper and being extremely flanky, now they can kind of just hold their ground, get a med pack, wait for their self-healing to come back, and they can get full health without having or needing a support to come heal them. Now, to kind of conclude the section where I'm going to talk about supports, I think in general gameplay, this actually really doesn't change the support role other than in terms of them having to feel like they have to heal any flankers and stuff. And honestly, this is probably going to make playing support harder because people are able to set up behind the supports and eliminate them when they are behind their team. And it kind of is going to make the support life a little bit harder, really. Now, since we talked about DPS while talking about support, I think it's just naturally easier to bring up DPS next. beyond quality of life and this making DPS just a bit easier because you don't always have to wait for your team to get full heals and stuff like that, this is honestly probably a buff specifically for the DPS. And honestly, I think I left that comment too much like a question, so I'm going to say it again. This is 100% a buff for the DPS. And to start, just think about having long range battles as playing Ashe, Widow, Hanzo. You take a little bit of damage, you no longer have to look around for a med pack or seek out your supports or anything like that. You can unpeek from the line of sight that you're in, wait a few seconds, let yourself heal up a bit, and then you could peek again and begin to fight again. Additionally, we probably will see the DPS meta shift to more dive and flanking type heroes like Reaper, Tracer, Sombra, and people like that, because getting this passive healing allows you to set up behind the other team a lot easier because you don't have to worry about coming back to your team for heals and then going back and resetting up. In between team fights, you can set up wherever you need and be prepared for them to come out. So this is why I say stuff like this is going to make the support life actually a bit harder, and it's going to definitely change the dynamic of the game a little bit. Now, lastly, I don't want to take too much time on each role, but let's hop onto the impact for tank. So honestly, in my opinion, this self-heal passive isn't actually going to affect the tank role very much. I think that is kind of the consensus across pretty much everybody who's talking about this. Tanks are pretty much always in battle. I think for those that are playing a little bit more ranged, like Sigma, this might help if you're able to mitigate damage, then you can kind of re-heal yourself some in between taking damage. And for characters like Doomfist and maybe Winton, you can kind of get out of the line of sight and re-heal a little bit in between some engagements. But for most cases, this is going to be just like a quality of life improvement when you're trying to back up. You know, you don't want to step in a random Junkrat trap and die when you're 20 HP trying to get back to your team. That's always annoying for everybody. I think stuff like that we'll see a reduction of just because you're going to have a little more HP. But in general, this isn't going to affect tanks that much in my opinion. So with everything we talked about here and everything we stated, I think honestly this is primarily just going to be a buff to DPS and an inadvertent nerf to supports. We're going to see a lot of different things changing with DPS in Season 9, I'm assuming. I think it kind of sucks that they're doing this update right when they're doing the rank reset. I think they probably should have waited a little bit or maybe introduced this at the end of Season 8 to give us a little bit of time to adjust. But I think we're going to definitely see the meta shift to probably a lot more flanking style type heroes. We might see a lot more Tracer, a lot more Reaper, like I said before. It'll honestly just be interesting to see the kind of methods and ways that people try to play around this. Obviously, I think the way we're going to shift the meta is based off of not allowing people to get that passive in. So you're going to want to always put a lot of pressure on people, and the only way you're going to want them to get that self-healing is if they escape because they are one of the last few people left on their team and they're just trying to get back and you can't necessarily push for whatever reason. I think in general that's kind of going to be the method of how everything's going to play. Yeah, people are going to be a little bit harder to kill if you're playing at range, especially if they play really good cover and they watch their line of sight well. But I'm just interested to see how the game's going to change and how everybody's going to play, honestly. So I am going to go ahead and leave you all with those thoughts and ideas. I'd love to hear what you all think. Please leave in the comments if you think that this is going to be a good change or a bad change for Overwatch. Let me know why. Let me know what roles you think are going to be better now, what roles you think are going to be worse now. And yeah, I'm curious to see how everything pans out. I hope you all have a great day, a great night, a great week, and we will see you all next time. Bye.